and I want to welcome you to our webinar today on reviewing the most important product updates that we've had so far for 2024. We've had a lot of recent fantastic updates that we're going to be highlighting, things like enhancing your workflows with a couple new template options. And one of those new template options is going to be something we're going to be highlighting in a case study alongside a lot of these other key enhancements. A main one being one of the most recent ones of the new onboarding templates and the new onboarding flow that we can customize to each client. We're going to be walking through some of the new models that are available as well to really streamline your practice as you begin to make proposals using a couple of these different methodologies, for example, and a lot of other key planning enhancements as well. We're also going to be highlighting a lot of the fantastic resources that you do have available to you when leveraging RightCapital. One of those resources being that during this webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions drop down to type out your questions there. More than happy to walk through anything you might want to cover further. And so switching gears into RightCapital. When we first log into RightCapital, we're going to be brought to our advisor dashboard. And before we dive into a little bit of a case study that we have for today to apply some of the new enhancements, I want to highlight some of the advisor level enhancements that we have available. So in our advisor portal, one of the first spaces that we're going to be going to is going to be the RightIntel dashboard. So under the RightIntel dashboard, this is a business management dashboard where we can really see what is happening with your book of business. Just a key couple of visuals that were included here recently that can be beneficial for really understanding your demographics that you have entered in the system is going to be the client demographics visuals, of course. So here's where we're going to see what is your average age of your clients, what percentage of your clients fall into the different age ranges. And we're also going to be seeing here too, what are the majority of your clients in terms of employment? Are we mostly looking at pre-retirees or post-retirees? So that's just a little bit of a helpful visual that has been recently been introduced for the RightIntel dashboard for those of you that have it in this fantastic book of business management tactic. There's a lot of other key pieces here as well, where we can also view a couple other client overview aspects, opportunities, and such within RightIntel. But that key enhancement for RightIntel, just very quickly, are those two main graphics that can be beneficial for really understanding that target market for yourself. Which is going to bring us to one of the other key pieces of a quick update that happened for the way we have open lines of communication with the tasks and notes within RightCapital. So if we go into our gear icon account section and under preferences, there's now also the option for those of you that might be already leveraging tasks frequently or leveraging notes very frequently within each client plan. You can also mark them as the default for new tasks to be not visible to the client or the default for new notes to be marked as not shared with the client. So for those of you that are leveraging them for that open line of communication with the client, or maybe it's a task that we're assigning to the client, if we prefer for that to be the default of not shared for any reason, for either of those, for notes or tasks, you also can set that preference from here. So if you're actually mostly using notes for internal records, or if you're using tasks to just assign tasks to yourself within RightCapital, this is a space that you can go to just check off within your preferences how you prefer for the default to be. You still can go in and make changes. So when you actually apply a task or actually add a new note within a client record, you can still make changes and adjust it to either shared with client or not shared. So this is just the default when you are adding a new task or a new note to a client's plan. But that's going to bring us to one of the next advisor level enhancements, which is going to be found within our template section. So under templates, there's two main new items within the template section that we can modify to really have that more personalized and also more efficient process for yourself as an advisor. One of the major updates being the onboarding templates. Within the onboarding templates, this is a space that you can go to set and create a new template that can rearrange the onboarding flow and also change the visual formatting. So this is going to be relevant for when we create a new client. When we create a new client, they're going to be put into what we call the initial data entry steps. And that's going to be holding our hand through entering the current plan or the current path's data. With that in mind, there might be a certain flow that you prefer or a certain ordering of the different tabs you might prefer. The templates is a space to start to create that. So within the template section, Under onboarding, we can add a new template by clicking on add template. From there, we can retitle this by clicking on the pencil icon. We can then title this onboarding flow number 2, hit the check mark to save the name change. And when we are looking to define our template, we have 2 options here for our template formatting. And this is going to be relevant for when we have it in those initial data entry steps for a new client. And that's going to be the profile cards layout, which is what we're going to be already familiar with. That's the 6 steps of initial data entry. Or we have the blueprint visual. Both of these are going to be the same type of data entry process. It's just a difference of visual formatting. And I'm going to dive into a client case where we can look at what the differences are in just a second. Another aspect with the onboarding template options is that we also have the ability to reorder the flow for the onboarding process. So if we know we typically prefer to talk about income, savings, and expenses first, we can drag and drop and reorder the onboarding flow from here. We can also incorporate additional tools in the onboarding flow as well. So if we know we're going to be asking and requiring the client to upload documents, or we want to store documents in the client record while they're still in the initial data entry steps, we can also check off the vault from here. And we can also include the risk tool as well. So if we have this incorporated as part of our RightCapital subscription, we can also assign that risk questionnaire by clicking on the questionnaire column header right here. And then from this drawer, we can then assign a new questionnaire to the client or co-client from this dropdown right here. That would then assign it to the client. So when you open up the client in the onboarding flow, they would then have the option to fill out the questionnaire while still in the steps of data entry. But this is where we can go to define what the template looks like. To look at a little bit of a case study today, we're going to go back into our clients list, and we're going to search for a client that we already have in the initial data entry steps. So when we search for a specific client, and we also now have the option to search for a co-client as well. So here for this particular client, for the Schmidt family, they're still in the initial steps of data entry, which means that we're going to see another tab populate right here, which is going to represent their onboarding flow. So within this tab for onboarding, we can choose to apply an onboarding template directly in this existing client record by just using the select onboarding template dropdown. That's going to pre-fill everything out for us and reorder the flow of the onboarding process. We still can make adjustments to our preferred formatting from here. So if we want to toggle between blueprint or profile cards layout, we can easily toggle between the 2, and we still can reorder the flow of each of the onboarding steps, just for reference. But to look at one of the new formattings for the onboarding flow, right now we have this client using the blueprint visual formatting for onboarding steps. So if we just open this client up, it's going to bring us to those initial data entry steps. So we might be familiar with this profile card layout. So for the initial 6 steps of data entry, that profile cards layout, that is going to be using the profile cards, which we're going to see a prime example here in family. But the blueprint visual is going to be pulling from our very popular profile blueprint visualization, which is going to highlight in a nice, easy to understand visualization all of those current steps or the current planned steps of data entry. So we even have it a little bit reordered here. So we're having step 2 represent income, savings, and expenses for this client. And we're going to see that nice visual formatting of these particular pieces of data entry. Like I said, the data entry itself is going to remain the same. It's just a visual formatting preference. And like we just reviewed, you can tailor this to each individual client. So if you know one client is going to prefer this particular formatting of their data entry, we can flip that client to the blueprint visualization, or we can have another client in the profile cards layout. So it's really customizable to the client, and you can even create those templates to have it be easily and efficiently applied to each individual client record pretty seamlessly in that onboarding flow. But just to review, if we are using the blueprint visualization, the data entry is the same, like I said, but to start to access and make modifications to any of this data entry, we can click on the card, and this is going to be very similar to our existing blueprint module, and make modifications to this existing card by just clicking on it, making those adjustments to the client record. And we can also still add new items. So if we needed to add a new income card, a new savings card, or a new expense card, we can do so still by just clicking on the add button. But here we're going to see who owns what. We're going to see the ages of the clients in that nice, easy and very familiar blueprint visualization. Similarly for the net worth, we're going to be seeing it in the net worth blueprint visualization option. We're going to be seeing here who owns what, how old the clients are, and what their total net worth looks like. We still can add new accounts in the net worth manually. And when we're in the onboarding flow still, in the initial data entry steps, we can also link accounts if we've got account aggregation as well. And under goals, we're going to see here that nice blueprint visualization where we can access and make modifications to these existing goals, start to carve out what their retirement monthly living expenses are, for example. So if they let us know their monthly living expense goal is actually $9,000, we can click into it and hit save, and we can still add new goals directly in this record. And we also have the classic blueprint timeline view that we can toggle to. So if we prefer this for the data entry steps, we can simply toggle and make that switch to that life map view, or we can toggle back to board view. And so we can easily go between the two depending upon what might be resonating the best with the client or for your own preferences. Next, for step 5, we also have that vault. So the vaults and the risk are the two new options for a tool available to be included in the onboarding flow. For the vaults, we can, of course, have that secure exchanging of documents, or if this is what you use to just upload important documents for the client record, we can now still incorporate that in the nice onboarding flow. Same thing for risk. If we do have risk enabled and we are looking to leverage the risk questionnaire in this process, we can then see this 6th step over here, or however we've rearranged it, and make modifications to that risk assessment, make those answers to the risk questionnaires, and also just see their progress for the risk questionnaire. As soon as we hit the complete button, that's going to bring them outside of the initial data entry steps and is going to bring them to the full modules RightCapital. But before we do so, I want to just highlight, if we go back into the advisor portal, if we click on the onboarding tab, just to reference, if we change this to the profile cards layout, we can still make that adjustment, like I said, because I see this is also a question. Can we make an adjustment to the onboarding flow, even if the client has already an existing plan? So as we just saw, we can make that switch. So if we have been starting to use the blueprint visualization of the onboarding flow, we can still make that adjustment. We can also still rearrange the flow of the data entry steps. Once we hit save and then open the client, we're now going to see it in that profile card layout, and we're going to see the reordering of the steps. So this is going to be that classic profile cards layout just for reference. It's a great question there about, can we make adjustments even if they're still in the steps? Absolutely. It's completely customizable even when the client plan has already started to been created. So it's a great question there. And just to review, if we have preferred layouts for the onboarding flow, that can be accomplished by starting to carve out some templates under the templates tab, going back into the onboarding tab right here. This is where we can go to manage and create new onboarding templates. So especially if you have a preferred layout for maybe the 2 main ways of visual formatting, you can definitely create multiple templates from here to leverage in your practice going forward. But that's going to be one of the biggest and most recent updates in terms of how we can treat clients and have that personalized experience to the client. One of the other new template options that are available is going to be the category templates. So staying under templates and then under categories, this is where we can go to add a new template for budget categories. Budget categories can be leveraged in the budgeting tool, of course, and it also can be leveraged when we're modeling retirement living expenses or pre-retirement living expenses by using a detailed worksheet. So if we're using any of those 3 different tools, that's when the categories can come into play. So in this categories templates option, we can click on the add template button to add a new template. We can then click on the pencil icon to retitle the template. We like template number 1, of course. We're going to hit the check mark. When we are adding a new budget category template, we can use this drop down to copy the current template we have toggled to. So if we're trying to build off of it and create a new template, we do have that option available as well. So it's going to be pretty beneficial if you know your clients typically have similar spending habits or similar budget categories or worksheet categories you want to create. We can add those new categories by clicking on the add category button. From here, we can add new expense categories, new income, and new other categories as well. So let's say we know that most of our clients are probably having some additional coffee categories. If that's the case, we know they're spending a lot on coffee. We can click on the add category, expense category. We can then retitle that, indicate that it's dedicated to other coffee. Hit the check mark to save the name change. And we can also make modifications to any of these default ones as well. So if we know that the loan payment's maybe not the right nomenclature for most clients, we can simply click on that pencil icon and make modifications to any of the default categories as needed. And we can also remove any unnecessary categories as well. And when we're looking to apply this into a client record, if we just go back into our clients list, and just for an example, if we open up the client case study for today, the Schmidt family, one of the spaces that we can include this is going to be pre-retirement and post-retirement living expenses, which we can enter in spaces like goals and the expenses section. So if we click into the goals section and click on the retirement living expense card, right now we have it entered to use a simple approach, which means we're just entering the total lump sum that we plan on having for our retirement monthly living expense goal. But if we prefer to break it down in a detailed worksheet, if maybe that's the way we prefer to collect that data, we can simply change our expense approach to a detailed worksheet. And then from here, we can fill out how much they're spending in each of the categories per month. And we're going to see some of those options indicated from here. So that's where the specific worksheet is going to come into play when we are looking to actually leverage some of that data entry aspect. Another key thing for those two things we just reviewed for categories and onboarding templates, especially onboarding templates, if we have a specific layout that we prefer and going forward, we want to use that as the default for when we create new clients, we do have the option to indicate that. So that way you can have that streamlined and be set up for you instead of necessarily needing to apply it every time you create a new client. So if we're trying to establish that as your default for new clients for any of those templates, we can actually do that by going into the three dots in the right-hand corner, going into client settings. And if we go to client groups, this is where you can go to create and also manage existing client groups. So if you wanted to create some additional client groups, you can certainly do that from here. But the important thing for right now is that when we check off a certain group for the default for new clients, we also have the option to modify what we have as the default templates for these new clients. So if we click on the edit button, that's going to open up a drawer in which we can edit the default templates for new clients for planning access, which is going to be the flow or the ordering in which we see the tabs in RightCapital. The same thing for the onboarding templates. So especially if we prefer maybe the blueprint visualization or we prefer to have a different layout and we've created that template, we can establish that as our default onboarding template from here. Same thing for snapshot. Same thing for vault templates as well, and the same thing for default category templates. So if we prefer for our template number 1 to be the template for default categories, we can simply toggle to that particular option and hit save. And going forward, when we create a new client, they're going to be using that onboarding flow and they're going to be using that category template option as well. So that's going to be a way to really streamline your workflows with onboarding and budget category templates. We do have another couple key pieces that were enhanced, and this is going to be maintained in the advisor portal, and it's going to be under the model section. So under models and under annuities, we also can now create annuity models. So especially if we are going to be continuously modeling a couple different annuity products that we know are going to be the same for most of our clients, this is a space that we can go to really streamline that data entry process for you by creating that annuity model. So under models, annuities, we can add an annuity model by clicking on the blue button right here. If we already have existing annuity models entered, we can also copy one of these existing ones and build off of it by simply clicking on the drop down right here and toggling to copy the current annuity model that we have selected. But when we create a new annuity model, we can click on the pencil icon to retitle it. And once we retitle it, we can hit the check mark to save the name change. And we can also enter what type of annuity this is going to be. So this is going to be a space that we can enter this information now. And then when we go to apply this, this is going to be pre-filled for us. And it's going to be just kind of eliminating that repetitive movement you might be constantly making for common annuity products you might be modeling in the system. So from the annuity type dropdown, we can select which type of annuity is, whether it's a variable annuity, fixed annuity, indexed or indexed variable annuity. For each of those, they're all going to have their own respective pieces of data entry that we're going to see populate from here. And we can modify that cap, the buffer, participation, for example. And like I said, this is going to be translated to when we actually apply this particular annuity. In this case, we're going to be modeling a fixed annuity for this example. And we also have the opportunity to also model the distribution options off of the annuity product. So as we know, when we're looking at an annuity product, there might be a couple key ages that are typically the option for when we turn on guaranteed income riders. So if we have that product and we know it's got a very common setup for the income rider, that's when we can leverage that add distribution button. It's going to open up a drawer in which we can define one of the distribution options. So we can title this for our ease. Maybe this is going to be joint income at 68. And we can change our distribution type. So if this is going to be a guaranteed income rider with a benefit base, that's when we're going to leverage lifetime income. But if this is actually going to be modeling an annuitization situation, meaning we're going to be fully surrendering the value of the annuity in exchange for income, we can leverage this option. But let's say it's lifetime income, for example. From there, we can then define whether it's single or joint. In this case, it's a joint income rider. We can also enter that roll-up rate that might be applicable. We can indicate when the roll-up stop year would be, whether it's a calendar year or after a number of years. And we can also indicate when the income starts, whether it's a calendar year, the client's age, or tied to the client's retirement. In this case, it's going to be tied to client age 68. And then we can enter what the income percentage is, indicate the annual increase if applicable, whether it's no increase, customized increase, or just tied to general inflation. In this case, it's going to have a small increase each year. And we can also indicate if there's any applicable account value-based fees or benefit-based fees for this product as well. And so once we hit save, we're now going to see that included as an option for the annuity model. So now that we've started to indicate and model that annuity model, I want to highlight while we're in the space another option that we have available for one of the enhancements for equity compensation. So we're going to be walking through how to model each of these in a client plan, the annuities investing schedule. But I first want to review one of the other enhancements for models, which is the vesting schedule enhancement, where we now also have the opportunity to model a vesting schedule on a monthly, quarterly, and semi-annual basis. So we, of course, have those default options still available for annual vesting schedules, but we now also have the opportunity to model, like I said, those different types of periods that we might be wanting to model those different vesting schedules. So for equity compensation pictures, this is going to be looking at stock plans in specific. So when we have a restricted stock unit, incentive stock options, or non-qualified options, any of those are typically going to have their unique vesting schedules. And so in the model's vesting schedule section, this is where we can go to create a custom vesting schedule as needed. So especially if we know that we have a lot of clientele at a certain workspace, we know that they typically have similar vesting schedules. We can also create that custom vesting schedule here. So that way going forward, you can also leverage that as an option for those equity compensation situations. And so for some of those pictures, when we have certain employers, their vesting schedules might be done on a quarterly basis versus an annual basis, or might be done based off of a percentage on a monthly basis. If that is the case, with the vesting schedules, we have the option to change the vesting type from an annual vesting schedule, where we indicate that percentage, to semi-annual, to quarterly, or to monthly as well. So if we switch to, for example, the monthly vesting schedule, from there we can indicate what the vesting period is for that equity compensation picture, whether it's a year vesting schedule, we're looking to model across 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5. And this is going to be different based off the different vesting type options we select. And then we can enter what that percentage of how much of the grant is vesting for each month of the 4 years, for example. But this is where we can go to create that custom vesting schedule on that monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, and of course the annual basis. We already have a couple of unique ones already entered. So we're going to be looking at modeling these in the client case that we're working on today. So we're going to go back to the client list and open up the Schmidt family plan. And we're going to be going to the net worth section. So under the net worth section, we do already have a stock plan entered into the Schmidt's family plan. So we're going to click on the stock plan section. If we're looking to add a new stock plan that's an existing stock plan, we can click on the add account button and then click on stock plan. That's going to open up the drawer in which we can define the stock plan, including entering who the owner is. We can also enter if this is going to be tied to a specific ticker symbol that's publicly traded, like Google, for example, or we can indicate that this is actually a private stock and just enter what the current share price is. From there, we can indicate what the associated stock return should be. And then very importantly with stock plans is making sure that we're entering an accurate vesting schedule, as this is going to have a huge impact when it comes to cash flows in regards to the proceeds, the profits we're going to see, and also from a tax standpoint as well. So especially when we're trying to be tax efficient in our planning, vesting schedule can have a huge impact to a lot of stock plans tax treatments, because it's going to be triggering a lot of taxable events for certain stock plans. So from the vesting schedule drop down, we have the option to select from any of those vesting schedules that we created back in the advisor portal. So if we're trying to use one of our unique options, we can select that option from the drop down. We can enter what is any sort of treatment for vesting at separation. In this case, it's going to be at death. We can also indicate that typical data entry for a stock plan, including the exercise strategy, whether it should be exercised upon vesting, starting now, and then exercising upon expiry. That's going to be really relevant for ISOs and NQOs, and then at start year and at vested, or start year and expiry. And we can also enter that liquidation strategy. One of the other newer updates as well for liquidation strategy, so we have a couple different options here when entering our liquidation strategy. The first one is just liquidating the stock upon exercise. We also can liquidate 1 year after exercise, so we just hold for a year. This is going to be really relevant for that tax efficient planning for certain stock plans when we're trying to push it to a long-term capital gain situation. But there's also that strategy for stock plans, which is liquidating stock at a specific year. If that's the case, we can select that option from the drop down. We can then indicate what year we're looking to liquidate the stock at, what the starting year is. And we can also indicate if we want to liquidate all stock in that year, or if we want to liquidate it over a number of years. So especially for certain kinds of stock and for ones where we might have a large portion of investments in within a stock plan, if we're trying to alleviate some of the tax burden, one of the strategies is typically to liquidate over a number of years. So if we're leveraging that strategy, we can model that right here in the net worth, indicate how many years we're going to be liquidating over. And of course, we would enter what the grant details are, including the grant date, the type of grant, how many shares were granted, and also indicate if we want to have a unique treatment from the plan strategy. These are also relevant for when we are modeling our stock plan module, that dedicated equity compensation module. We can also use that to incorporate different liquidation strategies and compare and contrast strategies as well. But this is just looking at a current existing stock plan strategy. Next, when we're looking to model an annuity model or pull from one of our models, we can click on the Add Account button and go into Investments. From here, we can enter the annuity title, change the account type to an annuity, and this is for an existing annuity product. We can also make proposed annuity purchases as well in the retirement analysis. But from the account type dropdown, we'd indicate what type of annuity it is. And then since we have created a couple models, we can copy from model. So to pull from one of those pre-filled pieces for us, we're going to click on the copy from model option. We can then select which annuity model we want to pull from. And then we can indicate which distribution option we're looking to pull from as well. So if we're maybe looking to pull from the joint income at age 68, we can select that option, hit save, and we're going to see all of these annuity type fields pre-filled for us. We still, of course, have to enter the total balance of the annuity as well, and the benefit base, since this is a lifetime income. And if we click on the distributions lifetime income button, that's going to open up the drawer in which we can view what is happening with the distribution type. We're going to see it's all pre-filled based off of what we just entered. And I want to note that even when we apply any of these templates, you still have full control over making adjustments. So if we needed to adjust this maybe back to a single, we can make that adjustment. We can also adjust what the income percentage is as needed. So that's just a way to really streamline your workflows and pre-fill some of that repetitive data entry for you, but you still can make that adjustment to make it a little bit more personal to the client's plan. But now we started to build out that current path. We're going to hit the complete button, and that's going to bring us to the full modules of RightCapital. So now that we're out of the initial data entry steps, we can still modify things on the current plan, of course, by maintaining the profile section and clicking into any of the relevant fields. We're going to see the profile blueprint here. That's going to be the one that we had checked previously for the formatting. Still can make adjustments into any of the profile sections from here. But I want to highlight, because I see this is another question, that they commonly are looking to propose an annuity purchase. How do we go to do so and pull from that model? So it's a great question. It's actually going to be what we're modeling next. So if we go to the retirement analysis section, this is where we're going to see the outputs of the plan. We're going to see that probability success. Probability success is, of course, going to be looking at the Monte Carlo simulations and the 1,000 trials of market volatility, and it's the percentage of those trials that make it to the end of plan without running out of money. So right now, the current path is a 99%, which means there is one trial that's running out of money, but that's where our proposed strategies come into play. If we go down to the action items, this is where we can go to start to curate our proposed strategies. So we can make adjustments to these existing items by simply clicking into the fields and modifying the numbers or using the sliders. But to propose a new path altogether, that's when you click on the edit button. It's going to open up a drawer in which you can add or remove existing action items by checking them off, or to propose a new path entirely by clicking on the add new items button. So if we click on add new items, this is where we can go to propose an annuity purchase. So if we click on annuity, it's going to open up this drawer in which we can indicate some of the parameters for the annuity purchase. Certain items such as who's the owner of the annuity, when is the annuity being purchased, if it's immediately, a calendar year, or an age or life event. So let's say this is happening next year. We then also indicate from which type of account we're pulling from. In this case, let's say it's Schmidt's 401k. And we're also going to see that opportunity to copy from model once again. So if we know that we're using one of our go-to annuity models, we can click on copy from model. We can then select the annuity model from the drop-down, indicate that specific distribution option, hit save, and that's going to be pre-filled for us. We still, of course, want to make sure we're entering that value in which we're purchasing the annuity for, and the benefit base for those that are marked as lifetime income, and any account value bonus that they might be getting as a incentive for purchasing this annuity. And like I said, you still can make modifications to the distributions or any of these parameters as necessary, but let's say we like it as is, so we're going to hit save, and that's now going to be incorporated as part of their proposed strategy. Another key enhancement that we have when it comes for client planning is going to be found in our estate module. So if we go into the estate section, now we're going to be having that discussion with the client about some of that end year planning. Here under estate, we can find our checklist, our beneficiary list, and also our analysis. So under estate analysis, this is where we can access our flow chart, where we can analyze what is going where when we have the client and co-client passing away. We can also see what assets are going to be going out of estate, how much in total is going to heirs. We can see what's kind of happening in the mock-up for the taxes and fees. We can click into any of these to see a breakdown of what's happening with each of these pieces. One of the newer enhancements within the last couple of years is the addition of estate taxes at the state level. So if somebody is in those couple of states of the United States that is going to be subject to estate tax, and if they're living in that state in the system when they pass away, we would then see any of that estate tax calculated if relevant and if they fall under the category of having enough assets to be subject to that tax. So we're also going to see that included here. Just for reference, under the details tab, this is going to be a balance sheet breakdown of the same information in the flow chart. So if you prefer this visual formatting, you can also see what that looks like from here. But if you scroll down to the action items, This is where we can go to define a little bit further the estate picture. So we can define what we want for the planning horizon or when they pass away for each client and co-client. We can indicate that funeral expense and also the probate expense. But if we click on the edit button, this is where we can go to include a couple other pieces of the estate planning picture. Things like the cumulative gift for each client and co-client, gift tax paid, DSUE amount if applicable. But we also have the option to propose trust strategies. So if we're looking to alleviate the tax burden at the end of life or making sure certain items are going to be going to out of the estate by the end of life, typically that's when we might be leveraging a trust strategy. So if we click on the Add New Trust button, we're going to have a long list of options for trust strategies. But let's say we're going to be looking at a credit shelter trust, for example. We can select that trust from the list of options. We can title this. We can indicate how much we're purchasing this trust for. We can also indicate now when this is going to happen. So one of the new options is to propose a new trust purchase in a future year. So if we're looking to purchase this, in 10 years from now, maybe in a couple years prior to them passing or next year, we can use this drop down right here to indicate that calendar year. We can have it be tied to the client or co-client's age, have it be tied to the retirement age, or have it happen towards the end of life. So let's say we want this to happen at a specific year. We want this to happen at age 68 for Winston. We can also specify that cost basis as applicable when we're pulling from an asset, whether it's just using it pro rata, proportionally, or specifying cost basis ratio. We can also indicate any income term for this particular trust product if there is going to be an income strategy with this, any trust fees, income amount, and when it starts. And once we hit save, we're now going to see that incorporated as part of their estate flow chart and also the details tab as well. So now we're going to see a certain amount of their assets are going to be going out of estate essentially with that credit shelter trust or CST. We're also going to see under comparisons, now that we've incorporated a trust strategy, how much more is going to heirs with the trust strategy versus the current strategy of no trust, and how much less we're paying in taxes and fees if we do follow this trust strategy. So this is also just going to be a beneficial visualization that's always been here, and it's available for you to have that conversation. And one thing, since we did propose a trust, we're going to see a trust tab located here. And we're going to see, if we scroll a little bit further down, when we purchase the trust, that beginning balance is going to be populated here for us. We're going to see those returns, the taxes and fees that are applicable for the trust, if at all, and any distributions that are happening as well. So this is going to be one of those other key pieces of estate planning, and one of the other enhancements was that functionality of proposing a future trust, and also just honorary mention to the estate tax as well in that update.